The big story of the day, though, is that Stephen Cluxton has once again been snubbed by that small, select group of people, the elite of the Irish Gaelic football writers' coterie and broadcasters. And Rory Beggan has been named the All-Star goalkeeper. That is the big story this morning. It is a scandal. It's an outrage. It's 5 years since he was an All-Star.
Yeah.
I just need to check that. Darren told me that
No, it is.
earlier.
It's 2013. That's
it
also
might just have been a bit of hype.
That's also the last time an All-Ireland winning goalkeeper won the All-Star for goalkeeper.
Oh, so they just don't like the dubs, is that it? I mean, there were 7 dubs given All-Star, so... I mean, you could have given 13 of them, though, couldn't you? It's the greatest team of all time, with the easiest All-Ireland victory that they've ever had, so therefore you must say they're playing at their highest level.
Well, like, just to say, it's not just the dubs. I mean, the year after 2013, Dublin didn't win the All-Ireland. Kerry won the All-Ireland, but they didn't get the All-Star for the goalkeeper. Paddy Durkin got All-Star goalkeeper in 2014, despite the fact that he made that big mistake in the All-Ireland final, which shows that really, when it comes to maybe a selection of errors throughout your season, you're not really judged on that too much. It's kind of on the standout moments. But what it says to me mostly is that it's still goalkeeping, the basics of being a shot stopper, despite the modern influence of goalkeepers as an attacking force and as an attack starter. It is still down to the basics. So you win an All-Ireland when you don't concede too many goals, when you don't give up too many goal chances. And that's what this Dublin defence have done over the last 4 or 5 years. And Stephen Cluxton just basically hasn't had to utilise his shot-stopping array of talents as much as some other goalkeepers, and it's as simple as that.
Except his kickouts have completely changed and revolutionised the game of Gaelic football, and so he has become like one of the most important players on his team.
And you take that into account, and the most outrageous kick-out taker this year, and certainly free taker from goals, has been Rory Beggan. So there is an irony and there's a contradiction in what I say to a certain extent, but like the last 2 years, David Clarke got it on shot-stopping. This year, Rory Beggan got it because of just his unbelievable range of passing off the tee.
I think he got it for that one kick out that went the length of the field against Kerry. I think everybody's like,
oh, 18
that's
points
it.
this season.
He's the All-Star goalkeeper. That's it. It's over now. He kicked
18 points.
The length of the field. I've never seen that before. Give that man the All-Star. I'm not hearing any arguments. I don't care that Stephen Cluxton has changed the game. 18 points is great, but like they're frees. He's not dribbling the ball up and taking long-range shots and sticking it over, is he? I mean, well, let's talk about that.
He's obviously not, but...
And what happens when he does dribble forward and hoof the ball unmightily forward in the last minute of a game when you're desperately looking for a shot?
Well,
what happens?
He gets his team knocked out of the championship.
So no one cares about that. And last year, like at the last moment of the championship, the Mayo goalkeeper kicks the ball out over the touchline. We're like, just don't kick the ball out of the touchline. Kick it in the direction of one of your players who's being attacked, and you're going to get a free, and the referee's going to have to play on. No, I'm going to kick it out over the sideline.
Well, that's what I mean. Durkin in 2014 handed Kerry an All-Ireland, and he won the All-Star for goalkeeper of the year as well.
So just going back here, when was the last year you said an All-Ireland winning goalkeeper?
Well, it was Cluxton in 2013 was the last time an All-Ireland.
Cluxton wins in 2013. 2014 it's Paul Durkin. 2015 it's Brendan Keeley. What did he do in 2015 that was... He
was brilliant in the Munster final, I remember. But he was like consistently excellent all year. He didn't do anything stupid.
Did Cluxton have a bad year in 2015 or something? Did he make a couple of mistakes? Was that the year that...
Well, they got caught in the hop by Donegal. I think it was one opportunity that we got to, give All-Stars to somebody else for 1 year.
Yeah, okay. 2016, David Clarke.
Clarke did back-to-back then.
2017, David Clarke.
And then Rory Beggan. But Beggan was the outstanding goalkeeper in the country this year. And it might be because Monaghan are weaker defensively than Dublin that he got to show his talents, and also the fact that maybe when you look at their full back line, when you look at their half back line, their movement perhaps isn't as excellent as Dublin's. They're just not as uniform, they're not as kind of mind-boggling to play against as Dublin. And quite often, this is just a theory, but quite often it seems that Stephen Cluxton, when it comes to his kickouts, we've just got used to him then looking so simple at this point.
Yeah, well, I think that's... it'd be good to have an ex-manager in the room. I mean, obviously you can't because that manager would have managed some county, and so therefore everybody will assume a bias on his part, who goes, it's really hard to get a goalkeeper to hit this small window that somebody's running into at pace. It's almost impossible. I would argue that last season, Cluxton's kick-out against Tyrone, the first one of the game, was the end of the match last year in 2017, and that he deserved the All-Star for that kick-out alone. I know you're obviously not going to give it on one instance, and it's like over the whole course of the year, but Let's talk about the 2018 All-Stars. Magnificent 7 for the best team in the history of Gaelic football, but not the one that I think most fans wanted the most. Certainly most Dublin supporters. Stephen Cluxton did not make the cut. Rory Beggan is the All-Star goalkeeper. Conor McKeon is with us this morning to talk to us about this. Conor, you've obviously been covering this Dublin team for, I don't know, is it maybe a decade and a half at this point? I don't want to prematurely age you a bit there, but he is their most important player over that time, right?
Oh yeah, 100%. And what's more is, I know you could make a case for Kieran Kilkenny and Brian Fenton in the 4 in a row, but I still think that Cluxton has been the most influential player on the 4 in a row. None of which of those seasons has ended with him getting an All-Star. Now, to be fair to the All-Star selection committee, they don't take, cumulative greatness into these things. It tends to be very specific and the minutiae of who was the best goalkeeper in an individual year. But I still think on that basis that Cluxton had a very, very strong claim this year. And I think he had a very strong claim last year, and I think he had a very strong claim in 2016. So I just think it's odd that, in 3 years when he's gone very, very close to an All-Star, he hasn't got them in any year. And Rory Beggan's claims are strong, but again, there's a contrast and compare thing here. Beggan played 9 games, whereas Cluxton played 6 and a bit. Beggan was much busier. He made more saves, but he also made more mistakes. He had more spectacular kickouts because more teams pressed up on Monaghan's kickout, but he also gave more kickouts away. People talked about his kickout performance against Kerry, but late on in that game, Kerry pressed up and won 3 kickouts that they turned into scores. And he also had mistakes like the one he kicked over the end line against Tyrone in the All-Ireland semi-final. The goal against Fermanagh, Owen Donnelly's goal, which knocked Monaghan out of Ulster when he came prematurely for a ball. And another one against Armagh, which ultimately wasn't particularly important or detrimental to Monaghan. Whereas Cluxton, if you're looking for mistakes, really the Damien Comer goal was the only one. But similarly, if you're looking for saves from Cluxton, the penalty save from Brannigan in that game as well was the only save that kind of stands out. So, look, I'd love to know what way it's weighted, mistakes versus how busy you are versus how many games you play. On the basis of Cluxton's leadership qualities, the influence he has on other Dublin players, and the standards that Dublin play to are probably set by Stephen Cluxton. But again, they're very intangible, and I'm not sure that those factors make it into the All-Star selection committee meeting. Yeah,
it's tough because obviously it's people who are watching a fair bit of Gaelic football, but at the same time, a lot of it seems to be an emotional decision. It's as Owen said, he kicked 18 points this year. I mean, so he's taking long-range frees. Fair play, that's great, but that's not actually the reason that he's getting the All-Star, unless that is the reason that he's getting the All-Star, and it doesn't make that much sense.
Yeah, well, again, the criteria of the All-Stars, particularly the goalkeeper position, that's last year, for instance, David Clarke was incredibly busy, but that's because Mayo were beaten in the first round of the championship and they had to scrape by Clare and Derry, and he had to save a couple of penalties. So David Clarke profited from the fact that his team weren't up to much early on in the championship. And similarly, Clarke made a couple of big mistakes with kickouts very late on in the All-Ireland final. Whereas I think with Cluxton, one of the more remarkable things, or one of the many remarkable things about him, is his performances in All-Ireland finals, particularly in the second half of All-Ireland finals. Anytime the pressure has come on Dublin, he has always found his man. He is the definition of clutch. That kick out this year to Jack Mccaffrey that sucked in, I can't remember which Tyrone player, almost made him believe that he was going to get to the ball first, that set up a Dublin score. At a time when they'd gone 7 or 8 minutes without a score, I think that was nearly the highlight of the All-Ireland final, just as individual plays. So there is, I think, also a perception out there that what Cluxton does is easy, that anybody can chip the ball to the corner back, whereas I think there's a bit more to it than that. And the other thing I think he's probably suffered from is the fact that a lot of managers now at this stage, I think, have done the calculations, and that they've kind of figured out that Dublin are going to retain their kick out anyway. So it's far better to give them the kick 90 yards from their goal than it is to let them kick the ball into midfield and be behind the cover. So, and Dublin play in such a system that they will always take the quick, short kick out to the corner back when it's available. So again, a lot of what Cluxton does, it's very... He makes it look easy. It's not that easy, but I think a lot of the really spectacular long kickouts, like the 2013 All-Ireland final, he had a load of them in that game. It was probably his greatest ever performance. But a lot of those are kind of redundant now. Dublin aren't forced into a situation where they actually have to go long.
Tommy's making the point to me here that Cluxton hasn't won an All-Star since Dean Rock started kicking the frees. Is that a coincidence?
Yeah, that's probably a point. Yeah, well, that would buy into the notion that he hasn't been as busy. like Cluxton's last All-Star was 2013. Like he won 3 All-Stars before Dublin never won an All-Ireland, and he won one in 11 and won one in 13. So, like I think, to be fair to the All-Star selection committee, this is really the only controversy in the team, or the only talking point, if you want to put it like that. It's the only really contentious issue. But and to be fair to them, you can only really take this on its merits. It's whether Cluxton or Beggan was the more influential player in 2018. But I suppose, after 2 or 3 of very close goals, you start to wonder whether it becomes a particular issue that people have with Stephen Cluxton, or why is it that in very, very tight situations he's kind of losing these calls.
It's almost as if, in an ironic way, Stephen Cluxton is the Mayo of All-Stars at this point. At what point does Stephen Cluxton himself actually start to get a little bit pissed off? Of course, he'll say himself that he doesn't care. It's all about the All-Irelands and captaining the team to collective glory. But surely there's a little bit of a niggle here that, like, come on, give me a bit of individual recognition.
Oh, well, I know, I'll be fairly certain. Certainly a lot of former Dublin players, and probably a lot of current Dublin players last year would have felt that Cluxton should have got the All-Star. They see what he represents to that team in terms of, the standards that Dublin play to are the standards that Cluxton set. And I think I'd probably maintain that Jim Gavin's greatest ever move when he came into the Dublin job was making Cluxton the captain. Because prior to that, he was, this kind of, individual who had incredibly high standards. And when Gavin came in, he basically said, well, look, he's the captain, so that's everybody's standards. And I think a lot of what has followed for Dublin has come from how good a leader Cluxton has been. But again, I don't know how you break that down into a profit and loss column when you come around to selecting your All-Stars. But it definitely is a little bit odd. The other thing I think probably worked against Cluxton is the other 7 dubs. Like there could be no debate about them. They were all nailed on. And in these sort of situations, I think there is a tendency to make sure that there's a spread, that the All-Ireland champions rarely go over 7 All-Stars. That's just the nature of these things. So I think in any tight call with 7 nailed-on players, I think Dublin were going to lose the tight one.
Are there any other dubs you can feel? So we have the picture up there. Johnny Cooper is cornerback, James McCarthy centre-back, Jack McCaffrey alongside him in the half-back line. Brian Howard named at midfield. Ultimately that might be the position that Brian Howard in years to come becomes remembered as one of the great midfielders. Him and Fenton are 8 and 9 in the team. Mannion is 10. Kilkenny is 11. You can pick Mannion anywhere, I guess. Kilkenny probably could have been picked at 14, whatever. But anyway, so was there any other dubs who can feel a little bit left out today?
I don't think so. I think Niall Scully was probably the closest of the rest. But it was a season when there was a lot more. There were a far greater number of worthy forwards than there were worthy defenders. Like at the back, I think Owen Bon Gallagher is probably the most unlucky not to get in the team. Gavin White had his moments for Kerry as well, but probably not enough of them to be considered an All-Star. And up front, I think at various different stages, Shane Walsh and Damien Comer both looked like they might get into the All-Star team, but I think Ian Burke was the pick of the Galway forwards, and he was a fairly justifiable selection too. So I can't really see where, in our annual endeavours to generate controversy from the All-Star selection, I think it probably begins and ends with Cluxton. But the Howard thing, I think this is the first year that the selection committee were given kind of a poetic license to select players in positions other than that in which they were nominated. And I think that's probably fair enough, because Brian Howard played in the half-back line in Leinster. He played in the half-forward line in the All-Ireland series, but he played as much in midfield as Brian Fenton did. And similarly, I think a lot of people pick Colin Kavanagh at midfield because he went in for the throw-in, but ostensibly he was throw-in sweeper. He stood on the edge of the square. So I think given that kind of selection fluidity, I think you have a better balanced team, and I think this is a pretty good one, albeit like you could make the case for Stephen Cluxton or Rory Beggan.
Yeah, the point about the sweeper is interesting because it's kind of finally catching up with the modernity of the game. In previous years, there might not have been any room for a sweeper, or the role might not have been as well understood, its value and its importance. But so, for example, if they decided that they wanted to get Fenton in the team and they couldn't fit him as a forward and they couldn't fit him as a defender, that might have been the end of Colin Kavanagh. But actually being able to go, well, we're picking Colin Kavanagh at 3, tough luck lads, that's the way it goes. That's a welcome development.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to the first genuine All-Star team where you have 12 defenders in the team, 2 zonal sweepers and 2 markers and 3 runners from deep, because that's the way teams set up nowadays. It's like Paul Mannion being selected in the half-forward line. The reason is he was an inside forward, but he did a huge amount of backtracking. So I suppose, we all like looking at the All-Stars team and it's kind of 6 backs and 6 forwards neatness, but it doesn't really reflect the way a team, like 6 forwards and 6 defenders. I think there are far more defenders on the park nowadays than there are attackers when teams genuinely set up. But and it's the same with midfielders as well. Like Brian Fenton is an eye-catching midfielder in that he's an old school midfielder. But Brian Howard played right through the middle, all through the championship. He spent as much time around the middle of the park as anybody else. So I think in any year, I think players who are nominated in the half forward line could very easily be selected in midfield.
Who's going to win Player of the Year and Young Player of the Year, Conor?
I have to say my selection for Young Player of the Year, I thought Howard was exceptional, and I know David Clifford was exceptional too. I think in the All-Star in the Footballer of the Year shortlist, I think if the shortlist went to 4, I think Brian Howard would have been on it. And I think if the shortlist went to 5, I think David Clifford would have been on it. So in any year, you're doing well to get the Young Footballer of the Year on the All-Star team. This year, there's 2 certs of All-Stars in the Young Footballer of the Year. So look, it's a player's vote, and I think historically in Player of the Years and Player of the Months, I think the Dublin vote tends to get very diluted, or they tend not to win these votes. So I would give it to Howard, but I think Clifford will win it. Again, like a lot of what Clifford did this year was very, very eye-catching, and very, very spectacular. And people are very prone to footballers of his style because he's exceptional. And the Footballer of the Year, again, like I thought Kieran Kilkenny was absolutely exceptional, but there might be, I think people are kind of, again, like you're talking about a vote of inter-county players, and I think inter-county players would be more inclined to go with Brian Fenton. He came very close, I think, a couple of years ago. Was it the year that Lee Keegan won it, or was that last year? Maybe the year before. 2 years ago when Lee Keegan won it. And I think what Fenton does, again, it's a bit more eye-catching than the nuts and bolts of, Kieran Kilkenny's influence. But like for me, it's Kieran Kilkenny, but I have a feeling that Fenton will probably get the nod.
It's funny because I would have given it to McCaffrey on the basis that he was the best player in the semi-final and final, and I understand that it's an of the year award. But the point you were making earlier on about Cluxton being clutch in the big games, that should decide, for me, that should decide the All-Stars. Like that should be we don't have a regular season where everybody plays the same number of games. So the bigger games should have 10 times the weighting of an early round Munster Championship clash.
But Fenton and Kilkenny were brilliant in the semi-final and final as well, which is the counterpoint to that. Despite the fact that I actually kind of agree with you that McCaffrey, based on that, should win the gong.
Yeah, well, like Jack McCaffrey was man of the match, I think, in both of the All-Ireland semi-final and the final, which, he came from not having played in the early parts of the year to being a cert for an All-Star. So I'd love to know, again, this comes down to a player's vote. So sometimes it can be a popularity contest rather than an actual reliable indication of who the Footballer of the Year was. And I think Jack McCaffrey is another one of those players that would probably appeal to the inter-county players. Like everybody loves Jack McCaffrey. Everybody loves the way he plays on the front foot, playing with that pace, relentlessly attacking. And he added a kind of another string to his bow this year, which was attacking opposition kickouts, which he just didn't have in the past. I think there was 4 or 5 opposition kickouts in the semi-final and the final that he turned over for Dublin that they turned into scores. So again, look, I think he's a justifiable Footballer of the Year if he does get it, albeit, I think Kilkenny and Fenton's body of work is probably, bigger.
Fair enough. Conor, great stuff. Thanks very much for joining us this morning.
Cheers, lads.
It's Conor McKeon. You can read his stuff in the Herald now.